Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The Royal Dawi Air Force takes flight as they face off against the High Elves in this Warhammer World Championship matchup between Takoyaki on the Dawi and Melkorn on the High Elves. So for this group stage match, this is going to be the deciding battle or deciding series for this group, as at the current standpoint, Takoyaki is sitting at 8 points and Melkorn is at 7. And then Tank in this group stage is sitting at 12, and I actually have 9 group points so far. So the victor of this series can very well find themselves moving on. Well, will find themselves moving on. It just depends on how the score shakes out to determine which one it'll be. And there is even the possibility that there is going to be a little three-way tie for second. But for the armies, let's go over the Dawi army first. So there is, of course, the 2 gyrocopters with brimstone guns up in the sky. For the front line, it is going to be longbeards with great weapons all the way across that front line. 5 units of those. For the ranged, we do have Uthar's Raiders, which have a nice little ability that does reduce the missile resist armor and missile parry of all of the, or whatever unit it does target. And that is a 28-second duration, and with a nice follow-up between, the Uthar's Raiders armor piercing missile fire as well. We also have the Iron Drakes, which have bonus versus large and armor piercing, and then the 3 Quarrelers that can do a lot of damage to a single target if they're able to get it on the right one at the right time. We also have 3 Slayers in that back line, going to be looking to kind of keep some of the larger targets, particularly the Chariots, at bay. And then for the Lord, it is going to be a Rune Lord with the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and that Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin is going to be very helpful, especially with the Slayers, to help them get on the targets they need to, and then just allow all of their missile units to get the focus fire that they need. Now for the High Elf side of things, which is definitely a matchup that is favored for them, we do have a couple of Rangers on the flanks here. Going to be either looking to get into some of the ranged units, or as well as the Slayers, in which they will trade very well into, considering they are damage dealers, and the Slayers are definitely more geared towards dealing with large targets, and their low armor will get chewed through very, very quickly by those Rangers to boot. Now we have White Lions of Trace in that front line, going to be stretching all the way across, and now these guys, they have a nice little niche here against the Dawi, considering they have this Lion Cloak, which does give them a 30% missile resist, which is considerable against these guys, in addition to their 90 armor. And of course they have armor piercing weapon strength, so that means that they're just going to trade all that much better into that Dawi front line. We also do have some Swordmasters of Hoeth, which have a very similar ability here, which is that deflect shots, but that instead of giving them missile resist, it does give them a bronze shield, which will block 20% of all small arms missile fire when it is hitting it from the front. So their mastery of the sword definitely going to be coming into play there. We also do have the Pure Main Company, the White Lions of Trace ROR, which has Armor Sundering. So that Armor Sundering, again, just going to help all of these units deal all that much more damage. So like, for example, the Pure Main Company mixed in with these Rangers will actually do a lot of damage to the Dawi front line with that reduced armor to start with. We also have a Noble going to be rolling on in. Bonus versus infantry, armor piercing, high mass chariot unit, which is everything you need against the Dawi. And for another chariot unit, we have the Lion Chariots of Trace off in the back here. Same kind of stat line there, where it's armor piercing, bonus versus infantry. And for the Lord, it is going to be Alariel the Radiant. She is going to be coming in on foot, so she will lack some of the mobility, but against the Dawi, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Now, she does also have Earthblood, she has Tempest, and she does have the Star of Avalorn. So that Tempest can be very, very helpful against those gyrocopters, being able to make sure that they get shut down, and especially with that Eagle as well flying in the sky, going to be helping that Eagle catch these gyrocopters and make sure that they stay off some of the high value targets. And those gyrocopters definitely would like to be getting on those Lion Chariots of Trace if at all possible. But instead, she is going to be providing just healing and that little deterrent to the air units of the Dawi. But that's going to be it. So let's get things rolling, as the gyrocopters just going to be trying to get some shots in as they can. Well, the High Elf army is just going to be rushing right on forward, going to be exchanging shots with their archers and kind of just using the Eagle to screen those guys out for as long as possible. And then once that front line engages, they're definitely going to have a very nice time with these White Lions of Trace, who will trade very well into Longbeards with great weapons, even though, it's armor piercing both sides. The White Lions of Trace just a little bit better in that particular matchup, so they will be able to win that front line if they don't have or if the Dawi don't have any other units assisting that. So those are Quarrelers. The Uthar's Raiders are going to need to really put in quite a bit of good work if they are going to be able to hold back the High Elf rush here. Archers now just going to be continuing just trading some fire with those gyrocopters, as the gyrocopters just trying to get some flanking shots in, but all of the archer fire just keeping them at bay, and they need to be very, very cautious of Alarielle because she does have that Tempest, and a Tempest landing on these guys is going to be a major threat to them because that will reduce their speed, do a lot of damage to them to start with, but they are just going to be dodging as many archer shots as they can while the Quarrelers trying to get into range of the High Elf line, and they are getting very close to that range limit, and the High Elves are actually just going to be kind of waiting, just continuing to exchange fire. A few shots going to be raining in against the Great Eagles, but the gyrocopters just are unable to really get enough time to get some shots in. The Eagle and the Archers are doing a very good job at keeping things at bay, and Alarielle now kind of switching her attention to the other side, just trying to get in close enough to get a Tempest off. That's also kind of one of the reasons why you do like her on horseback here. Just having that mobility to be where you need her to be to get that Tempest off at the right time, and just kind of getting the healing that you need is going to be very helpful as well. Now, gyrocopters do get a few shots now into the Rangers as the rest of the High Elf army has their attention focused on the other unit, so they'll be able to get some nice, decent shots here. Now, I think the Rangers not exactly the best target for them to be shooting at. The White Lions or these Swordmasters would be a little bit better target, but in particular, these Lion Chariots are going to be the one that they want to be hitting. Archers, though, going to be returning some fire, providing a little bit more deterrent as these gyrocopters in the back are being chased back by this Great Eagle, who is going to be able to pretty much just keep them shut down. And another reason why, if you bring in gyrocopters, you generally want to keep them relatively close together, because when one is being chased, the other one can be firing, or you just want to go super heavy and make it a lot harder for the High Elves to shut that all down. But we do get an overcasted Tempest now, going to be causing a ton of damage to these gyrocopters, slowing them down, going to allow all of these archers to get a lot of shots in, and that is going to allow these chariots now to kind of push on forward. But Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin gets popped on the Lion Chariot of Trace, and it is going to be slowing these guys down by 72 speed, and the Marked by Uthar actually goes down on the Noble here, and I think had they been a little bit more cautious, because they were pretty much able to bait out both of those abilities so early on, because if you had waited until the Lion's Chariot was just a little bit closer and then hit that Lion Chariot with both that Wrath Ruin and Marked by Uthar, once the Iron Drakes and all of the Quarrelers and Rangers were all in range, you could have probably eliminated that Lion Chariot of Trace then and there, and that would have been a 1300 cost unit just off the table so early on for the High Elves. And having that disruption tool is going to be really big in the late or just mid to late game for the High Elves, just making sure all of these range units do get shut down. But the frontline engagement is going to be underway. Lion Chariots charging on into the Longbeards, and there is going to be some gaps in that formation as the Pure Main Company is going to have a clean line to these Quarrelers, while the Chariots of the Noble and the Lion Chariots of Trace going to be coming in to that frontal engagement, hitting those Longbeards, and are going to be looking to try and get into that back line, because the Iron Drakes now going to be firing on in, going to be targeting these Chariots, and the Noble here doing a lot of damage. But most of the shots, I think, did miss at actually targeting the White Lions. Definitely need to be targeting these Nobles and Chariots, who now seeing that threat, going to be going right into them, doing a major amount of disruption. But the Slayer is going to be quick to respond, trying to get on top of them, while this little push by the Pure Main Company is going to be completely surrounded by all of these Slayers, going to holding them in place as they are both unbreakable. They're not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And Quarrelers and the Uthar's Raiders now going to be turning their attention and start firing in at pretty close range, and they're going to be doing a ton of damage. You're just going to watch that HP just slowly, actually not just so slowly, very quickly melt away on those guys. The Ranger is going to be wanting to get on top of it, but we do get another Tempest. Looks to have completely finished off the last of the gyrocopters, falling amongst the ground here as away it goes. There is that last one finally getting taken out of the sky. Eagle completely dealing with the rest, and the Dawi are a little bit on the back foot here, as a lot of the High Elf army is going to be pushing forward, getting into the back line of the Dawi. I mean, the Slayers are going to be holding things back, but these Rangers are going to trade very, very well into them, and the Slayers now being forced to be used as a blocker for these White Lions of Trace, trying to get these Uthar's Raiders and the Quarrelers enough time to fire in, but there's just way too much stuff here. Star of Avalorn goes off. This time it is going to be on the White Lions of Trace, and this Noble should be topping off that Noble, healing up those White Lions. I think a better area of use would have been right here, getting 3 of the elite infantry on it, or even on the Chariot, which is off in the side here, shutting down these Quarrelers. But just the mass of High Elf infantry just flooding through the Dawi lines, going to be shutting down these Iron Drakes now, getting Earthblood, though, going to be healing up all of these units. Very nice cast on that one. And the Noble is just going to be roaming through the back lines, charging through the Dawi, doing a lot of damage there. And now the White Lions of Trace going to be making their way back into this front line here. Because really the Iron Drakes and the Uthar's Raiders are the two key units now at this point that need to be shut down. Not necessarily at all costs, but they definitely need to be mindful of. But of course, these units are going to be around some Slayers. We do get a Tempest off in the background, going to be hitting these Gyrocopters. It's just a regular cast there, but it does reduce the speed and allows that Eagle to really get on top of it, finish off some more of the models, and cause that thing to rout. Only one left, slivers of HP. I do not think it'll be coming back, and that will free up that Eagle now to kind of come in and assist in shutting down more of those range units of the Dawi. And I think that is just going to be about it for the beginning of the end for the Dawi. Dawi unable to really hold back. I mean, this is a very tough matchup for them. Just the White Lions and the Swordmasters are just like such great counters to like the entirety of the Dawi front line, and they just have so many other tools like Tempest and stuff that can deal with stuff that the Dawi have that can counter, and their quick mobility with the chariots is just like a perfect storm against these guys. And so not too surprisingly, the Hyles are going to be pulling forward here heavily into that balance of power, and it looks like they will be taking game one. And that means that Melkorn is going to be evening it up on the table in terms of score, and that is going to put him even at 8 with Takoyaki. Now, that doesn't mean that he's out of the woods just yet, because he does need to win the series, because otherwise he is going to fall victim to Takoyaki, and it is a head-to-head for the tiebreaker, so if he does pull through, he'll have that advantage in that front. That is going to be it. So let's take a look at the after-battle report to update that scorecard as Melkorn does take game one of this best-of-3 series. So the Great Eagle going to be pretty much just chasing off the Gyrocopters the whole match, just keeping them at bay. He did generate a nice bit of damage as well, 65 or 650. Archers doing 600 on that one, not so much on the other model there, but it really was just kind of, again, just a deterrent for those Gyrocopters. Because other than the Gyrocopters, the Rangers were like the only other really good target to be firing in against. The Rangers did some okay work, about 400 apiece. And then for the rest of it, the White Lions doing very nice, 1,000 on these guys, 1,100 on those. Pyramid Company, unfortunately, did get taken out very effectively by those Uthar's Raiders and Quarrelers. The rest of the units, the White Lions of Chariot, the Lion Chariots of Trace did quite well. Noble doing some decent work, and then Alariel's Tempest were really, really good at shutting down that Air Force and pretty much making those Gyrocopters a non-factor in this engagement. Iron Drakes, Uthar's Raiders did do quite well with that Marked by Uthar, and again, I think that at that initial engagement, just that cast of the Marked by Uthar and the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, just waiting just a little bit longer, get those chariots just a little bit closer into that danger zone, use it then, and you might have been able to eliminate those chariots, and that would have been 1,100 value that they generated that they wouldn't have been able to get in the disruption. It may have been enough to kind of swing things back the other way. Quarrelers, Slayers doing some okay work, but the Longbeards with great weapons just not up to the task against the White Lions of Trace. And that's going to be just about all she wrote for that first game. So we'll be getting right on into game two. The fate for round 3 is not yet decided. We'll see what happens here in game 2. For game 2, Takoyaki going to be leading on in with Prince Sigvald the Magnificent as he leads the forces of Chaos against the forces of the Empire, who will be led by Melkorn. So for the Chaos forces, we do of course have Prince Sigvald the Magnificent. He does have his auric armor, which does give himself a nice little bit of 8 hit points per second, a bit of regeneration. He does have Slippery as well, Heroic Killing Blow to increase some armor-piercing base weapon damage, and Standard Die, 24 melee defense, and plus 16 leadership in an AoE centered around himself. Otherwise, for the infantry, it is going to be all Chaos Warriors, one of which is going to be the Mirror Guard, which is going to be the ROR variant. So they have 100 armor, a ton of leadership, and of course they do have Silver Shields, Immunopsychology, all of that good stuff. Very good unit there, one of the better RORs in the game. We also do have a couple of Chaos Warriors with great weapons to help kind of chew through some of the higher armor of like the Empire Cap, because there isn't really a whole lot of good tools to deal with it, so they need a little bit of armor piercing values with these Chaos Warriors with great weapons, because like we had Demis here, this army here doesn't really have a whole lot of good tools to deal with it. Now of course we do have a Chaos Sorcerer of Shadows as well, who's going to be bringing the Forbidden Rod, the Scroll of Shielding, and also does have Melko's Misfying Miasma. as well as the Penumbral Pendulum. So a nice wind spell there to kind of chew through either the state troops or great swords, or for example, if you can group up on some Empire Cav, you can do a lot of good damage there. And Melkos is pretty much brought for that slow to kind of just allow a little bit more breathing room. We do have 3 Marauder Horse Masters going to be provided in the front, and I do love these units. Pretty much a great improvement over the regular horsemen. I think they're just overall stat line is better across the board. Like, only their speed is the same as the horsemen, and they will be able to trade just a little bit better into pistoliers, considering they do have 50 armor versus the 15 of the horsemen. And then they do have a couple more little units off in the tree line here, as we do have a couple Chaos Feral Manticores can be rolling on in that tree line, and that'll provide just a little bit of extra dueling potential with those guys. Now for the Empire State troops, we do have some pistoliers off in that front line, so 4 units in total. Very nice skirmish unit here, and they will probably be able to trade effectively enough into those smaller horse masters. They have more of that direct fire. They do have very nice missile strength on themselves, 38, and just a little, actually they have a little less range than the horse master, so if the horse master play is good enough, they will be able to trade better into those pistoliers, but just the sheer numbers that the pistoliers have is going to be on their advantage. We have Zintler's Reichsguard for the mobility core here. They do have immune to psychology, and on the other side we just have some Empire Knights. We have some more Outriders with grenade launchers. Now they're not going to have a lot of good targets. The Marauder Horse Masters are too spread out to really get a whole lot of good value, and everything else has very high armor, so it's just Chaos Warriors across the board, so that high armor is going to be pretty much be a good deterrent against those grenade launchers. For the rest of the units, we do have Spearmen on the flanks, and then the center ranks is going to be an Unbreakable Core of Flagellants, the Sigmar Sons, and another unit of Flagellants. We do have the Tempelhof Luminarch, the Luminarch of Hyash ROR, and unfortunately this map isn't really the best place to be using this thing. It really needs a good line of fire, and it needs a lot of time to fire up its shot as well, and there's not really a whole lot of good targets anyways for the Chaos side. Actually, the Feral Manticores are probably the only thing that's really going to be a good target for it. It's going to have a hard time hitting anything. Even the Chaos Sorcerer is going to be just a little too quick to get a nice good target on. We have a Warrior Priest going to be coming in as well with the Hammer of Sigmar and the Shield of Faith, giving a nice little bit of extra melee attack and some damage resistance to boot. We do have a Witch Hunter as well, who is immune to psychology, and he's pretty much here to just kind of help these pistoliers, considering he does have Accusation, minus 30 armor, minus 24 melee defense, and minus 22 missile resist. So pair that off on anything that those pistoliers are shooting at, and it's going to make very quick work of them in very short order. For the Lord, it is going to be Balthazar Gelt up on his Pegasus in the sky. He's going to have to be running from those Feral Manticores for pretty much the whole fight here, though he's going to be bringing the Staff of Volans. He has Final Transmutation and Plague of Rust. So Plague of Rust is actually going to be very, very essential for these Empire forces, considering they don't have, I don't think they have anything that has armor piercing. The Outriders don't, because the grenade launchers, but the Pistoliers don't have armor piercing, so they're going to need either the Final Transmutation or that Plague of Rust to really chew through the armor of all these Chaos Warriors. Just so much heavy armor on the Chaos side is going to be a pretty uphill battle, I think, for all of the infantry on the Empire. But that's going to be the armies, so let's get things rolling, as the skirmish phase is going to be underway. Pistoliers is going to be able to keep these Horsemasters kind of at bay, and if the Horsemasters are able to weather that storm, or even just kind of dodge enough shots in general, they'll be able to trade very well, or just get a lot of good damage off into everything else. The Tempelhof Luminarch gets a nice shot into the Marauder Horsemasters, and all of the Pistoliers can be focusing this unit down as well, but they were able to weather that storm fairly well. They did lose a few models to that Luminarch shot, but otherwise they will be able to continue fighting, and all of the Pistoliers are now on one side, which is going to allow both of the Horsemasters to kind of push their way onto the other flank. But of course that is going to leave that one Horsemaster very, very isolated, and is not going to be able to sustain itself against all these units. I can honestly just have one or two of these units just constantly on an attack order, the rest on the shoot order, and it's going to keep these Horsemasters on their toes for sure. The Outriders with grenade launchers firing on in. A shot from the Tempelhof Luminarch does kind of try and clip Prince Sigvald. It does do a nice bit of damage to him, but he will be able to heal up all of that damage, and they are going to be closing that distance rather quickly here. More of the grenade shots going to come into those Mirror Guard. Nice charge in by the Empire Knights, and that is one thing that the all of the Empire Knights and the Reichsguard really need to take advantage of is that the Chaos side doesn't have any good answers to any charges by the cavalry. They have the Chaos Feral Manticores, but otherwise, I mean, just the charges by the Reichsguard, they just need to keep cycle charging that front line as many times as they can. While actually at this point, Balthazar Gelt is in dire straits right now, running as fast as he can from the Chaos Feral Manticore, and we do get those abilities here. So Standard Eye is on one side, Shield of Faith and Hammer of Sigmar is on the other. And I do hear I believe that is the net. The net is being used on that Chaos Feral Manticore by the Tempelhof Luminarch. Now, the Tempelhof Luminarch needs to pull back as much as he can, but of course that will leave him isolated to those Chaos Feral Manticores, and all these Pistoliers now in the back line of the Chaos side need to start turning their attention to those Feral Manticores, or just kind of trying to focus down these Horsemasters as quickly as they can, because Chaos is just on the prowl right now, doing a bunch of damage. Though on one side, Prince Sigvald has taken a lot himself. He is sitting at half health, but if they cannot finish him off, he's just going to heal through all of that. Tempelhof Luminarch does try and get a shot off. It does shoot, but it does miss as the Chaos Manticore gets into melee now with that Tempelhof Luminarch, and it is going to need to try and pull back. But that Feral Manticore is going to be able to stay on its heels and should be able to make sure that that Luminarch is shut down now once for all. The other one is rampaged into the front line. There are some spears there, but the Flagellant's not going to be a major threat, and a very nice Pendulum going to be arcing its way through those Sigmar Suns and the Flagellants, getting these guys so very low. So that front line of unbreakable units getting extremely low in terms of units, 28 on these guys. Sigmar Suns have 27, but they are so low in health. The Warrior Priest as well is getting beaten back, and Prince Sigvald is now on the hunt for that Witch Hunter, and even the Chaos Sorcerer is going to be chasing it down and trying to just slow it down as much as possible to allow Prince Sigvald to get on top. But the Witch Hunter does have 360 fire, so it is going to be able to fire at his attackers throughout the course of it, and with enough shots might be able to kind of take down the Chaos Sorcerer, but the other Manticore does end up actually getting rampaged and routed off by all of these shots from the Pistoliers, and that's exactly what they needed to do, being able to get rid of this threat to Balthazar Gelt. But the balance power is in the favor of Chaos. Just all of this heavy armor is just chewing through the Empire State troops. And even though the Pistoliers are doing a bit of damage, all of them themselves are very low in terms of HP. Balthazar Gelt is still able to stay nice and safe, especially now that the Feral Manticores are being pushed off by the Pistoliers, and the other one is being rampaged into the Zintler's Reichsguard, able to get that guy rampaged, about to get routed as well, but another Pendulum arcing its way through the last of the state troops, and it is down pretty much just to the mobility for the Empire. And they should be able to play that advantage fairly well, though the Marauder Horsemasters do get into melee with one of the Pistoliers, and they will win that. They have some very nice melee stats themselves, and they are able to rout one of them, but they are going to be taking fire from the rest. The Tempelhof Luminarch, though, has taken a bunch of damage, though the last of its major initial threats is going to be off the field. I don't know where that other Manticore has gone. It may have actually been completely finished off. Just do a quick little spin around the map to see if I can see it. Looks like it is going to be routing through the tree line. It might have enough space to route its way back, but still, Chaos looking very, very strong. There's just way too much infantry left. I mean, these Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons are at full health. The Mirror Guard are very, very healthy. These Chaos Warriors, that's just way too much armor to really chew through, and the Empire just doesn't have enough armor piercing to deal with them. Tempelhof Luminarch just isn't going to have the space to get any shots in, though that getting rid of the Chaos Feral Manticore, very nice, good work on that front. But yeah, there's just not enough time or enough ammunition left on these Pistoliers, because once these ammunition is gone, it's like they are pretty much useless against these Chaos Warriors in melee, and especially Prince Sigvald, who does have perfect vigor. He's immune to psychology. There's no way he's coming down to anything that's left on the field. Balthazar Gelt sure isn't going to be able to do it. All of the shots from these Pistoliers probably wouldn't be able to do it. The only thing that would be maybe the Tempelhof Luminarch, but Chaos is not going to allow that thing to continue to fire in. So army losses is pretty much right on the fringes here, and honestly just firing the shots from these Pistoliers is going to be enough to trigger that, and that is going to be all she wrote for game 2. Takoyaki takes it back 1-1, and he does put himself at 9 points in the group stage. So let's take a look at the after battle report, and we shall update the scorecard as well. It is now going to be 1-1 going into the final game. So however this ends up, so if Takoyaki wins, he does end up with 10 points, giving him the second spot in the group stage. If Melkorn does win this next game, that will put him at 9 points as well. And with how everything kind of works out, I lost Takoyaki. I beat Melkorn, and now if Melkorn is able to beat Takoyaki, that's going to be that three-way circle of everyone beating each other. So that is going to be the only way for Melkorn to come back in it. So he needs to win this next game if he wants to advance on to round 3. And let's go over the after battle report here real quick, and then we'll get right on into game 3. So Temple off Luminarch actually getting 1,300 in value. Surprisingly enough, I didn't really see it getting a whole lot of good shots off, but apparently it did get some nice damage done in the process. Though still, I think it was maybe a mispick here. I mean, there's just the map in particular just didn't have any good line of sights to be able to use its range effectively. All the Pistoliers just did not get enough damage off. They were able to rampage and get all of these Feral Manticores off, but the Feral Manticores still got a lot of value themselves. The grenade launchers, as kind of expected, there just wasn't any good targets for them. It was either too high armor or too spread out formations, with like the Horse Masters, for example. The Slintler's Reichsguard did quite well, 1,200. Empire's Knight didn't do all too well, and all of the Unbreakable units, as kind of expected, it just didn't have the armor piercing to deal with all of the Chaos Warriors. Like if there was Marauders, then the Flagellants and the Sigmar Sons might have done a little better, but since there weren't, they just didn't have anything to really do. Witch Hunter, the Warrior Priest, and even Balthasar Gelt didn't really do all too hot either. Now for the Chaos side, Horse Masters doing very nice work. One of the units almost getting 1,000 in total value. The Chaos Warriors doing some nice work. These guys with great weapons getting over 1,000, really able to chunk through like the Reichsguard and the Empire Knights, for example, and then the rest of the Chaos Warriors just kind of tanking as many shots as they can, and that high armor was exceptionally valuable. Nice pendulums on the Chaos Sorcerer side, and of course Prince Sigvald only getting 788, but at that point he was pretty much unkillable at the late game, so that was kind of one of the good uses for him. He's just a super tanky lord, and if once the Empire is forced to engage with him, he will pretty much beat down all of the heroes on that Empire side. That's it for game 2. Time to roll right into the deciding game of the series and the group as you get right on in to game 3. For game 3, Marcus Wolfhart, the Master Hunter of the Empire, is going to be taking aim at the approaching forces of the Dawi. As we have Empire versus the Dwarves, Takoyaki will be commanding the Empire, and Melkorn does have the Dawi on his side. So for the Empire forces, we do have some handgunners going to be mixed in to these units, but for the artillery, it is going to be a couple of mortars going to be firing on in to the Dawi. Now, overall, the mortars don't have really the best armor piercing, but if you're going to be trying to get like against like miners, for example, even slayers to a lesser extent, they will be able to kind of chunk through things bit by bit throughout the course, and if they are able to stay nice and safe, because if you're just pretty much trying to avoid a artillery duel, because the Dawi cannons will really be able to do quite a number to the cannons and the pretty much anything that the Empire can really field against it. So really just trying to get as many shots in as with the mortars. They are relatively cheap as well, so it's not really the greatest loss in the world. And if your strategy doesn't involve or rely too heavily on the artillery, then it still can be a nice little distraction for the rest of your troops to kind of get in, which will be kind of these great swords here. Great swords going to have the armor piercing needed to chew through that Dawi line. And then it's just going to be a bunch of swordsmen as well. So a lot of units on the Empire side. We have spears, we have a bunch of handguns, and then we also have an Amber Wizard to boot as well. Amber Wizard is going to be bringing the transformation of Kadan, and so getting those Manticores into the Dawi line, shutting down those range units is going to be very helpful to boot as well. So, and Marcus Wolfhart, for him, he is going to be bringing the Hunter Snare, just a little bit of extra snare to kind of just either keep something in place long enough to get on top of it, just to kind of keep things away to allow your units to get into the back line or something of that nature. Can provide a lot of good help in that regards. Otherwise, it is just going to be that for his kit. Not going to be bringing any of his bows to get any more extra shots. Doesn't really need it, as he's going to be relying pretty heavily on the greatswords and the handgunners for the most part on the Empire side. Now for the Dawi frontline, we do have just Dwarf Warriors, we have Miners with blasting charges, and then we also have some Thunderers as well. So we have 2 Thunder, 3 by the looks of things, and the others in the flank. So we have 3 Thunderers, and then we have a bunch of Quarrelers mixed in as well. So a very heavy ranged build to an extent on the Dawi side. We also are going to be seeing a pair of cannons. and they will be trying to target down those mortars, and they've already been landing a few shots amongst the artillery crews on that side. And we have some slayers in the back line just kind of keep the any Empire cavalry at bay, but there isn't going to be any of that on the field for Takoyaki. It is going to be just a bunch of infantry charging the way of the Dawi. For the Lord, it is going to be a Rune Lord bringing in that Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and again, for cavalry, that would have been very nice to have, especially paired with the slayers. Even the cannon crews and thunderers can pretty much light anything up that does approach. The front line, for the most part, just going to be Dwarf Warriors. Nothing too special there. They do have really nice armor, so they have 85 armor, and against anything that isn't great swords, they're going to be able to do very well against those, just kind of holding that line, allowing like the miners, for example, to just chew through the light armored Empire State troops. But that's going to be it for both sides, so let's get things rolling as the shots from the mortars going to be raining from the sky, landing amongst the Dawi formation, and the Dawi are actually going to be pulling back ever so slightly, going to allow their cannons to trade well, because they don't have to worry about those like any return fire from the artillery pieces. They don't have to worry about like Hellstorms, for example, or any other great cannons. So they're just going to be able to allow their cannons to do a very good job against the mortars. But this is the opportunity, and the Empire needs to take advantage of that to push forward as quickly as they can. Because right now, if you take a look at the mortar range, all of the Dawi lines are pulling back behind their cannons. So the cannon's going to be just firing on in, and the mortars are just going to have to just try and get as many shots off as they can. Already one of the crews have been routed off, and they are losing artillery pieces very, very quickly, and they need to take just push forward as quickly as they can, bridge this distance while they still can, because once those mortars are offline, these cannon crews are going to start focusing on some more valuable units for the Empire, and that's going to be like the great swords are probably a very good target to be firing in against, because they're a big threat to a lot of the Dawi line. Now, if we take a look at their stat line for the great swords, they do have 32 bonus versus infantry and armor piercing, 95 armor themselves, so they have a lot of armor. They will be able to beat like Dwarf Warriors, for example, but they'll be the target of fire from like Quarrelers, from the Thunderers, from the Miners, trying to get rid of those units in particular, while Marcus Wolfhard is kind of on the flanks here. He does have stock, so he is hidden, and he's just going to be continually just firing shots in. I think he's trying to get into range of the Rune Lord, trying to get some shots off onto that Lord. Just kind of reduce the leadership by as much as possible. But now the Handgunner is going to be getting into range, and the Thunderers are going to be opening fire and returning the favor here. But their shots do miss pretty much their opening volleys, and now all the Quarrelers are going to be focusing down those Handgunners. So unlike the Thunderers, the Handgunners only have 20 armor. Thunderers do have 80, so the trade-off is going to be a lot harder on them, especially with the Quarrelers and assistants. So yeah, the Quarrelers, of course, are going to be able to deal with the lightly armored units of the Empire side, while the Thunderers focus down the great swords. Initial miners shots into the Sigmar Suns do a ridiculous amount of damage, taking them down to just about maybe a quarter health, if even that. Second volley taking them down to just slivers, and they don't have any pretty much healing or any good spells to really deal with that front line. They're just going to have to rely on the great swords to just kind of chew their way through, and 2 units of the handgunners are already offline so very, very quickly. We do get a net going down on these Dragonback Slayers, as Marcus Wolfhard does just try and put a little bit more distance between him and them. Great swords, though, are going to start getting onto the lines of the Dawi, as the Feral Manticore does try and shut down these Thunderers even more. But the cannons are still going to be free to fire at this point. One of the cannons is a little bit too far forward, though it is trying to just finish off these mortars, and the Empire has done a good job of kind of pushing that envelope here, as the Great Cannon crews are kind of on the edges. Actually, not so much on the edges of the range, just kind of looking through it. But yeah, these cannons do want to be pulling back, and they actually do get themselves very out in the open, because once these great swords do finish off these these Dwarf Warriors, I mean, even the handgunners can focus down these cannons at this point with how far forward they are. The other unit of Feral Manticores now being able to rout off these Thunderers, but though the Thunderers are already back in the action, going to be changing its attention to these Thunderers, just trying to get as much damage done to that back line of the Dawi. Malspar is still pretty even, especially now that the great swords are engaged in melee, are just able to kind of just completely chew through all of the frontline troops. You can just see kind of across the board, the Dawi warriors are just not able to hold up against those great swords, but all of the range units are still alive and well, and they are very spread out, and the Empire doesn't have any very quick mobility. I think that is definitely something that they should have invested in, at least to an extent, because they're not able to take advantage of the spread out formation now of the Dawi, and they just have to rely on their great swords to just chase things down. And while they're chasing things down, there's going to be another unit to just turn and fire. So like these Thunderers are getting a nice crossfire into this unit of great swords here, for example. The Feral Manticore does try and get onto the Rune Lord, but unfortunately it does get shut down and I think that is by just the extent of its summon duration. But the second summon does get on the field, and that is going to be it for the spell casting. There is no additional spells on the Amber Wizard. Probably would have been nice to have brought a Flock of Doom just for a little bit additional damage dealt. But Bounce Power is either even or just barely in the favor of the Empire now. But we get another net this time on top of the Cannon Crew and the Thunderers, and that's just to hold these guys in place. But unfortunately, the Greatswords do end up routing. There's too much focus fire or crossfire on these guys. Greatswords now getting caught out by these Slayers as they do try and continue to press their advantage, but more and more units of the Empire is starting to get into the backline, but they are getting very beat down, and they just need to, at this point, the Greatswords need to focus down these Thunderers. These are the key units that they need to deal with, and I think at this point, like, this unit of Greatswords needs to pull off and go for the Quarrelers, allow those Spearmen to just hold back those Slayers for as long as possible. They have shots from those Handgunners being able to whittle them down more and more, and even the Mortar Crews are actually coming back online. They still have all of their units left, so they're going to be able to just get some shots off as they can. With the Quarrelers now just focusing down Marcus Wolfhard, he has Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin popped on top of him, so that's minus 72% speed, and with these Thunderers as well firing against him, that is a ton of damage against him. He has used up a lot of his ammunition. The Empire still does not want to lose him. Bounce Power is slightly in their favor, though. Just all of the frontline infantry for the Dawi is completely gone at this point. They have like 0 Dwarf Warriors left. I mean, these guys are now getting routed off from the handgunner fire, but now it is pretty much down to, I mean, for the most part, even the infantry for the Empire side is very low. You do have some great swords here, just kind of keeping things busy. I mean, only 1 Slayer left there. But like the Quarrelers are keeping them shut down, but these great swords just don't have the speed to catch these Thunderers, and that's allowing this unit of Thunderers to, again, just get a nice bit of crossfire into them. And there's just too many range units left for the Dawi and just too spread out for the Empire to effectively chase them all down. And now you can see the Dawi are starting to climb back in that balance of power. Now that they have shut down the Amber Wizard, I mean, that's just a little bit of balance of power change. Marcus Wolfhard has taken a lot of damage, and it is just down to like the handgunners, and the handgunners do not trade well into like Quarrelers, for example, or especially just a bunch of Quarrelers. The Quarrelers will just get a lot of good damage onto the handgunners, and all these greatswords just have been unable to catch these Thunderers, who've just been continually just kind of kiting them away, while the rest of their handgun units just fire away. And just the high armor of the Dawi is just kind of being a major problem here for the Empire forces in the late game. Mortars just continuing to fire. These guys are sitting nice and safe, but the cannon crews on the Dawi side are also still firing away. This one does have only 1 artillery piece left, but these handgunners don't have quite enough ammunition to deal with. They might be able to rout off these Quarrelers with this salvo, and I think they should be able to do that. But it looks like they are actually able to stabilize their leadership just enough to maybe withstand the final salvo. But you can see it, just all the great swords, as I was kind of saying before, just getting slowly just dragged through the ground at this point, and just the return fire from the Dawi is just way stronger. Marcus Wolfhard's getting routed off. The Amber Wizard is back, but again, doesn't have any spells left to be using. And the ammunition on the handgunners is getting dangerously low. Only this guy's now used up a lot of its ammunition. These guys only have a little bit of ammunition left, and just the mortar crews are left, and the mortars just don't have the damage output to deal with the heavily armored Dawi lines. And if they stay spread out enough, like the shots just aren't accurate enough. You're seeing all of these shots, just most of them missing. A few shots do land home. But yeah, it's just not looking good for the Empire here in this late game. Dawi pulling through. This is kind of how this matchup tends to go, is like the Empire kind of start off on the good foot, but they just don't have the long-lasting stopping power to finish off all of the armored Dawi, because there's just pretty much all of the Dawi line has high armor. Quarrelers have 80, Thunderers have 80. It's just like even the cannon crews have 40 versus like the armor from these mortars here, which is only 20, so they just trade a little bit better in that regard. And it's just 1 unit left that has any meaningful ammunition, is these handgunners are able to rout off these Quarrelers, but now that these Thunderers are going to turn and fire, army losses just sitting on the very fringes for the Empire, as the last of the handgunners are just returning fire against some of the Dawi forces. But even though bounce power actually does kind of creep back a little bit towards the Empire's favor, as these shots from the handgunners are able to waver these Thunderers. But will it be enough to break these guys if they are able to rout them off and keep them at bay? I just don't think they have enough, because I mean, these Quarrelers, I mean, all of the units on the Dawis are so very low in terms of HP as well. I mean, it would not take a whole lot to break some of these forces for the Dawi, though these Thunderers here have quite a bit left, and they're able to now kind of get into these mortar crews firing off the last of their shots. Only one artillery piece left here, only one left here as well. And just maybe a little bit of cavalry here, I think, would have made a major difference in the outcome of this game. I mean, the Empire fought so very close to the end, but now they've lost the last of these handgunners, and there the balance power just shifts back into the favor of the Dawi forces. And it isn't quite over, but I think there's not really a whole lot of a reliable way for the Empire to really pull back. Last of the ammunition is shot on these handgunners, and I think that's kind of really it. They just lack the armor piercing at this point. Only one mortar crew left, and all this Rune Lord has to do is just run into melee here, and these Thunderers as well might just be enough to kind of finish off this crew. And that is going to be it for the Empire. Almost, it was just on the very fringes of being able to pull it back, but unfortunately they were not able to do so. So let's take a look at the after battle report and update the final score as well. Melkorn does drag out a victory here, giving himself 9 points in the group. And take a look at the after battle report real quick as well. Thunderers doing some decent work. All the Quarrelers doing some pretty good as well. Cannons did very well. One of them getting 1,200. More of the Thunderers, 350, 800 on these guys. I mean, the Slayers, they didn't really have a whole lot of good targets, but even though these Slayers didn't have any large targets for the attack, they were still able to generate 1,000 in total value. And then Frontline was really kind of where the Dawi line really faltered and came close to losing it for them, was the Dawi Dwarf Warriors, they just can't hold back the Great Swords. The Great Swords traded exceptionally well into them. Like if we take a look at the rest of the Empire forces, mortars not really doing a whole lot of good work. Handgunners, some of them did some decent work. Actually, most of them did very, very well. That's the thing. The handgunners 1,000, and these guys 900, 600, 900 did very well. Great swords as well, getting 700. I think overall they maybe didn't do so great in terms of like their cost. But still, it's like it was so very close for the Empire. They just didn't have enough armor piercing in the end. I think Marcus Wolfhart, losing him, maybe he got just a little too close to that front line, but I really think the biggest fault for the Empire was not having any quick mobility, like just getting some Empire Knights. If you just keep them in reserve for the most part, keep them out of range of the cannons, especially in that late game when the front line for the Dawi was completely broken, that's when those Empire Knights would have shined so greatly, just being able to finish off the Thunderers and allow like Great Swords to actually catch things instead of getting crossfired throughout the course of that fight. But otherwise, it was such a close game in the end, and a very good series to boot. But for the final, I guess, result of what this game meant is that for the group stage, the group that I am in, it ended up being, we have Tank at 12 points, we have Takoyaki, Melkorn, and myself, all three of which are at 9 points. And all of us have beaten each other. So what that ended up meaning is, instead of just having 3 advance in our group, which is how all of the groups are at the beginning, the top 3 advance, we do have 4 people advancing to group 3, or to the group, or stage 3 group stage, or the 3rd group stage, I guess, if that makes sense there. But so looking forward to the next round, and today is the last day for people to get their games in for the 2nd group stage, and the next group stage will be starting pretty soon here, and look forward to a video going over, hopefully I can get all the results for the 2nd group stage, get that out to you guys, see how everyone did, who's advancing, and then see what the group stage or the 3rd group stage groups look like, and I can get that out to you guys as well. So should be some good fun, some good interesting stuff to look forward to, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good one.